Are you curious about how fashion designs go from concept to reality? How does the product creation cycle look for fashion? In this video, we're going to look at the technical side of fashion and how flat garment sketches flow through the entire product creation cycle. In another video, we already covered what a technical garment sketch is. In case you would like to know, you can download the free technical garment sketch through the link in the description. This is an example of what is used in the garment industry. And make notes on that as we go through this video. We have so many people touching this technical garment sketch as it goes through the product creation cycle. And this technical sketch is the most crucial thing in bringing that garment to life. So let's go through that product cycle together now. What is the process behind creating a garment and a collection in the garment industry? Let's go through that process together so that you fully understand who does what behind the scenes. In the store, we have a beautiful collection that all goes together and mixes and matches well. Well, in order to get to that point, we have to backtrack quite a bit. The first step in the process is that the product manager, category manager, or merchandiser, all of those roles are similar roles but called differently in different garment companies. But for this sake, we'll call it a merchandiser. That role first does a lot of research. What sold really well in the past? How many did we sell of different colorways? How should we make updates to bestsellers or carry over bestsellers? They do lots of research in how the previous collection did in the stores, and then they also do research on competitors, which is called competitor analysis. They'll look and see what are the trending styles, what sort of features do those garments have, which is called USP, unique selling propositions. Those different features or USPs might be reasons for the garments that sell better, or they might also look at pricing compared to all of those USPs that are in that garment. For example, if you had a garment with a whole bunch of zippers, zippers cost more. So what are the prices behind those garments with lots of USPs? And is that a reason why it's selling better? Or is it the fabrics or the colors, the silhouettes, the way it fits? So all of that research is done by the merchandiser. Merchandiser does the research. They determine what sort of unique selling propositions, USPs, or features those products need and at what price points. They'll also give any sort of feedback to the designers about what colors are trending and selling well. They put all of this information and they decide how many different styles they need in order to mix and match into their collections to create a cohesive brand collection. Once they decide how many styles they need and what USPs they need and the pricing, then they create what's called a brief. They write a brief and then they pass that over to the designer. Usually in that meeting, there will also be a product developer, pattern maker, or technical designer, so that everyone's on board with the direction of what they want. They won't say what sort of styles they need specifically, but they'll definitely give those USPs that are critical in making the garment at the price point that they need. So that's called the brief. The brief might have some competitor images of what's selling well or previous items from the collection that also sold well. Then that designer takes that brief, which is just mainly text and maybe a couple images, and then they start designing. So then the designer starts to design into the brief. They need to make sure that they can create that style for the price that was in the brief and achieve any important USPs, unique selling propositions, which would be design features. Now, often the designer might not know exactly how much they can afford to put into that garment. That's when the product developer comes in. They might do some sort of pre-costing to make sure that that design is hitting close to the target pricing. Additionally, the fabric and materials team will often be a part of that briefing so that they know what fabrics they're going to have to start developing or sourcing. So we also have here product developer, and we'll get a dotted line because they're in the meeting. So this brief is then given to the designer. The product developer, pattern maker, or technical designer and materials developer is usually a part of that briefing just so that they know what's coming. That designer takes the main role from that brief and they design into the brief. Now, they need to make sure that they have the USPs, the unique selling propositions, meaning any sort of design details that are important in achieving that style and the price. Then often that product developer might come in and do any sort of pre-costing to make sure they're achieving the price needed in the briefing. The materials developer is also really important in this process because they need to make sure that they're getting materials. They're either developing or sourcing materials that are going to achieve the pricing as well in the brief. So we have here the product developer handling pre-costing. Once that design is created by the designer, they might type in any sort of information that is critical to that design. They will take this, which is called a tech pack or garment sketch, technical garment sketch, anything like that, and they will have a handover. They'll pass this over to the product developer and pattern maker or technical designer. So they take this, they bring the fabric to the meeting, and then they have a handover. Along with this technical garment sketch, there is what's called a tech pack. This tech pack includes the sketch, plus it includes something like the bill of materials or a cutter's must. It also includes the measurement chart, or that can be referred to as the spec. That product developer is in charge of costing generally, although sometimes it can be different in different companies. They also handle construction and workmanship details, so the way the garment is sewn together. Then we have the pattern maker or the technical designer. Most companies have either a pattern maker or a technical designer. Sometimes they could also be called a technical engineer or garment engineer. And these are the people who create the actual patterns, usually are the pattern makers, or the technical designer or garment engineer might give information to the factory for them to make the patterns, meaning they'll create a garment spec with the measurements that they want to achieve in the actual garment. So they handle the pattern and measurement spec. Then the designer has a meeting with both the product developer and the pattern maker to hand over the sketch. The developer will ask any sort of workmanship or construction details that might need clarifying, and the pattern maker or technical designer will ask any sort of questions that might need clarifying regarding the pattern. It's also up to that developer and pattern maker or technical designer to make sure that everything in the garment is feasible. Often when we get garment sketches from designers, there might be some things that might need some adjustments, or things that might not be the same between the front and the back sketch and might need some adjustments as far as design line positions. The pattern maker might also pay attention to any sort of proportions in the garment that might not look right and clarify anything like that. What do we do from this point? That product developer is making any sort of comments and giving information to the factory, and this includes one more step here, which is called a bill of materials, which we refer to as BOM, BOM. Bill of materials, and in some places it's also called a cutter's must. Cutter's must can also be made by the pattern maker. It depends on what type of setup the brand has. So from this point, we have still only a black and white sketch. We don't have any colors generally. Sometimes at the very beginning, there might be 1 or 2 colors colored up just to get an idea, but the coloring up process usually comes later. Then from this development phase, we call even the pattern making part and the product development, we call that the product creation and development phase. Here, we then go into passing it over to the factory. So from here, the product developer and the pattern maker or technical designer will pass it on to the factory. And we might call it the garment maker or garment factory. So generally, these are the people who have the direct contact with the garment maker or garment factory, and then they go through the sample or prototyping process. If they have any sort of questions, they will come back to the product developer or pattern maker or technical designer and ask them what sort of things they need clarifying on. Then that garment factory starts sewing the Proto 1 or Sample 1. They make that proto and then they ship it back to the brand and they go through a fitting process. So we're fitting then that Proto 1, usually the designer, the developer, pattern maker, or technical designer, they start that fitting round. And then it just goes through another loop. Developer, pattern maker communicates all of those changes from Proto 1 to the factory, and then they start making Proto 2. Salesman samples can also be referred to as SMS or production. Once Proto 2 is approved, sometimes you might need a Proto 3. It really depends on the setup. Some places will accept Proto 2. Some places will only have 1 Proto, and then you go straight to salesman sample, or fast fashion will often go Proto 1 straight to pre-production or production. So this process does vary for every single company, and this is really specific to each company. So we have Proto 1, Proto 2, salesman sample, or pre-production. Some places that don't sell in other retail stores, let's say they have their own stores only, they might go straight to pre-production or production. Pre-production meaning they get a sample before they start production. So this process could really be variable there. And even in high fashion, this process here might change a little bit. Oftentimes the designer has a lot more say in the briefing in high fashion. Often the designer is pushing the collection more in high fashion, and that merchandiser is coming in at a later stage. Generally, this is the more or less way of working for many of the companies, but of course everything is different, and every single company I've worked for has had slight differences in this process, especially from action sports brands. So we have some differences there, but generally this is the setup. So at this point, those salesman samples, usually they'll get 1 or 2 colors of each style, and then the salesman will go out and sell the styles to the retail buyers. The retail buyers will look at the collection, they'll do their own merchandising, and they'll say, okay, the floor has this much space for these types of garments and this much space for these types of garments. Then we can make collections and outfits accordingly. You can tune into the next video to see how other departments utilize flat sketches. It's not as technical as the product creation cycle, but it's still utilized for visual purposes. Don't forget to download your copy of the free Tech Pack sketch. If you're looking to improve your sketching skills, check out the Fashion Design book. For those of you who don't have the book yet, it's a library of silhouettes and style details where you can design and create your own flat sketches. In the book, there are many QR codes which link to videos just like this one. Whether you're an aspiring designer or a self-designer sewist, this is an excellent must-have resource. You can click the link in the description below to buy your copy today. I'm Gina Renee, and I teach online pattern making and design courses so that you can design clothes you love that fit. Let me know if you've enjoyed this video by clicking the like button and subscribing. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and I'll see you in the next video.